All of these things that we've identified are things that form our identities, are the things that give a frame to our epistemological beliefs. They're the beginning of our epistemologies. So now it's about to get real. Get ready. Buckle your seatbelts, okay? Look at the things that we wrote, the things that build epistemologies, and try to answer those questions for yourself. Because these are the things that influence what questions we will ask, how we will go about attempting to answer those questions, and how we will interpret the data we get when we get data. All of these things will influence that. And when you do it, kind of be aware of the fact that it's not just things that you have experienced that will shape this. It can even be the lack of experiences that will shape it. There are things that you haven't experienced that will influence this, right? And that goes into perception of things. So this stuff can get pretty personal really quickly because you're kind of unpacking the deepest parts of who you are. So I don't want you to feel pressured. I'm just giving you an opportunity. Are there any of the things that you identified that you would like to share?
I'll go first.
Thank you, Dr. Miller.
All right.
Thanks for not leaving me hanging.
And I think that, just to kind of give you guys an idea of my epistemological stance, I was very quantitative because of my field, because of kinesiology. I started out being very quantitative because that's what everyone did, and and that's what I was taught. I mean, there were no qualitative classes in my master's program because exercise physiologists don't do qualitative really. But as I did more education courses and started, actually getting some criticism from professors and about, why are you asking that question and what lens are you looking through and stuff, did I start to understand that, it isn't all about this, that I need to see this too. So I think, but some of the things I think that have influenced my research, I have only lived in Texas my entire life, even though I've lived in different regions of Texas. And Texas is pretty, there can be variety in Texas, although it's still very Republican and conservative and stuff. I've lived in Wichita Falls, Austin, Texas, 2 different places, but still only Texas. I think too, my career has been surrounded by obesity crisis in the nation. And so you're talking about temporally, I think that's what's going on. And so all of my research is centered around that, kind of thing. And you go in because of all the facts that are out there surrounding that. So I think that and then also my coaching mentality and athlete mentality, I think, plays a big part in how I view things and how I tackle a problem or whatever. So those are some of the things. They're not very sensitive. I didn't get very sensitive.
That's okay. It doesn't have to be deepest, darkest secret moment.
Right. So, but yeah, I think that those are definitely some things that have influenced how I look at situations and how I approach research.
Thank you.
I had one that really kind of covered everything if I looked at it through that direction, but non-negotiable would be like formal education is important. So that's in every one of the categories from then on. That's what's shaped, what I do on a day-to-day basis, and the way my family feels about that. So.
Because our epistemological stances don't just influence us as researchers, they influence us as people, right? So the way we interact with our family members is indeed influenced by these things as well. And so it's kind of the trend in research to begin acknowledging these in the research. Right? In a lot of qualitative studies, there's a position statement where the researcher says, all right, well, here's my baggage.
Believe it or not. I went a little differently because I had to write questions first before I could really think about my own position. So that helped me clarify. So I asked things like, why do we have to interpret the Bible literally? Why is that so important? Why, and what does it mean to have this literal interpretation? How does it impact the world? And of course I know their answer is that you're damned to hell if you don't become saved. So I can see why that's an imperative for them to do that. But what it showed up, I think for me, is I'm probably a qualitative researcher to the bone in that I don't believe there has to be one particular answer that's right. One size does not fit all for me. So for me it's okay if they have this belief and they want to work on it, and where they run into trouble with me is trying to enforce their beliefs on mine. I can listen and I can even discuss, I can find common ground, but I can't, where I won't give is that I have to believe what you believe, and that everybody else does too.
And this issue of religiosity is significant because if you look at it objectively, both groups here are essentially experiencing the same fallacy, right? One group is saying the non-negotiable is that this is true. And the other group is saying the non-negotiable is that this is not true. And so neither group is actually open to whatever the answer is, because they have already presupposed the answer and are just trying to prove it, which generally we say is not great science on both sides of this coin, right?
Or that there must be an answer.
Right.
Even further.
And that leads to a kind of a hallmark of qualitative research is that, generally speaking, we don't make claims of universal application. We say, well, this is what happened in this time and place with these people. Can't replicate it because we will never be in this time and place with these people again, but here's some things I think might have been going on at this time and place with these people. No applicability, no telling other people what to do, just, this happened, here's why I think it did. Can't prove it because we'll never do it again.
But there is some connection. I mean, some of the themes carry forward and you find them.
Yes, repeatedly. Over time, in different places, in different locations, with different people, we see the same things over and over, and that lends credence to the theories that develop. Does anyone who's not, is anyone who's in their 20s who wants to answer? Thanks, Jacob.
It may be going more into like a philosophical standpoint, but you know, when I took my philosophy class, it also helped me as far as where I stand. As a child, I mean, you can't really think on your own. You're pretty much told, this is what it is, this is what we're going to do. So from a young age, you don't really have a standpoint, you know, in certain realms. But as you get older, especially like high school and college, that's when you really start to develop these morals, these relationships, these values. And I feel like that's one thing that comes up. Like, that was one thing that I just kept thinking about, is not necessarily how different, but how much more broad my vision is on things now. Because you go through different experiences, you go through different time periods, different societal norms. So what was a norm when I was a teenager to what's a norm now in society is almost completely different. Everything's more lax now, like as far as just television. Back in the day, they would be freaking out seeing things that are on TV now. So definitely with the temporal experience and even geographic, because I've been in Texas, I've been here my whole life, so that's shaped me the way I am. So I know whenever I graduate and go off, I may hit a culture shock because it may be a totally different world over there. So that's one thing that like I just kept thinking about reviewing those.
Thanks, Jacob. So, because I have class, I'm going to just wrap this up. It doesn't really matter if you're going to do qualitative or quantitative research. Your epistemological stance is important because either way you approach your research, this is a real thing that will influence how that happens, right? And just, you know, another push for mixed method studies, I think that used together, this really is a good balance, right? Because if we go too far into the qualitative, then we're just interpreting stuff based on whatever we want to be true, right? We can't do that. There have to be standards, right? And so sometimes one of the ways that we bring that in is to introduce a quantitative component. Sometimes we do it in other ways with triangulation. I mean, there are other ways to do this, but introducing a quantitative component is one of the ways to do it. And if you are mainly a quantitative researcher, introducing some qualitative aspects can really add some context to what you're saying, can really increase the likelihood that someone will bother to read it, right? If you contextualize it into things that are important to someone, they're more likely to read it. So I think that these, you know, again, we tend to teach them very separately, and we are in one camp and we don't like to go to the other, but I think that we're moving as researchers in the academy generally to a more inclusive, mixed kind of perception. So what questions do you have before am I supposed to do this part, or I'm sorry, am I supposed to do this part, or does someone else do this part?
You can if you want. That's up to you.
I mean, do they have to, I'm sorry, I don't know, because I've never actually been to the end of one, because I have to jet for class all the time.
We did it last
Oh,
time.
jeez.
No, you don't.
We did
Okay,
it last
then
time.
I'm just gonna leave.
She gives y'all quizzes, sorry.
I was told I had to, you know,
No.
have questions, is that true?
Maybe later.
No.
I thought
I
she
think-
gives them quizzes or
That I mean,
tests.
don't look.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, but I
Sorry.
wants to use them later.
but those are good questions that they need to be able to answer, hopefully.
Well, thanks.